Is the stream up? Is
Yes.
that live?
That's
That's,
quite live.
that's life.
Okay.
Okay, so we are Fantasy Talk. We're here to talk again about our draft, about going into week 1 and what your concerns should be. I'm here with Timely John, Vandekamp, and Edward, all of whom were part of our in-house Fantasy Rift draft.
Woo!
And how about each of you go ahead and introduce yourselves while I make sure the stream looks good.
Wait a minute.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start it off. My name's John King. I'm just a fellow writer here at Fantasy Rift. I started my days writing about it on Reddit, and pretty much here I am, really simple.
Alright, so John's really simple. That's what we know.
It's just that simple, man. It didn't take much. I just loved it, and I had so much joy coming out of it. I was able to find my way to here. Found more people who loved it just as much as I do.
Alright. What about you, Vandekamp?
My name is Garrett Vandekamp. Up until recently, I was called Edward Baharas because my picture was in the wrong place. But now I'm back to being Vandekamp. I wrote for a blog, League of LCS, last split because I just really loved it. And now I am back with Fantasy Rift, putting my content up on the site. I mainly do statistical analysis, but occasionally I'll do some more satirical stuff. And sometimes giving you advice on who to start.
So only sometimes.
Only sometimes. You're just a viewer, let's be real.
Okay. Edward? Other
Alright,
than
guys,
the guy who drafted Reckles because he was first pick.
Alright,
What a
guys,
bad
I'm
pick.
Edward Barajas. I should be winning this draft for our league, just due to my great strategical thinking of picking up Reckles with the first pick. But I've been into esports since about 2008 with Gears of War 2. And I've been keeping up with different games such as StarCraft, League of Legends, Hearthstone, the list goes on. I feel like I have a lot of strength in the Korean region due to the fact that that was the best region by far in StarCraft. And I used to live there for a while. And I hope that all my knowledge in the pro scene and all my knowledge in other fantasy leagues, like in football, helps me strive and give other people knowledge into esports and the fantasy league that they've been setting up with LCS.
Alright. I'm Gentleman Gustav. I think I'm the old guy here. I used to write for Reign of Gaming back in Season 2.
Grandpa. Okay.
And did a bunch of mathematical analysis. I think one of my bigger articles was like why certain AD carries don't need Last Whisper, Kog'Maw, Vayne, Corki. Corki's passive used to crit, in case you didn't know that. So double PD actually did more damage than PD Last Whisper. Of course, now there's the M-Pen builds and everything, so that's joyously obsolete. But I've been writing about esports for the last 2 years or so, and I switched immediately to fantasy the moment it came out because I think I've always been a fan of fantasy sports. I played fantasy football long after I had stopped playing football, that sort of thing. So
You
the
played
first-
football?
Yeah, I was a cornerback.
Ooh, okay. Alright. Moving on.
The first thing that I just want to do is go through the draft that we did and just kind of point out what the strengths and weaknesses of the teams are. So if you guys all have that handy, I'm going to go ahead and switch over. Obviously, Edward is Wild and Reckles. He got to pick up Reckles in round 1, which
Peter.
I still feel like is I mean, you named your team that before we even started. How did you know? Just hacks. John
Just
is
RNG gods.
John is Flassengage. He was number 2. He picked up Froggen, and it went from there. At number 6, we have Vandekamp, who has just disappeared from the call. Who picked High first, and that's a pick that I want to talk about once we get there. And I was 7th. I picked up Nif on the swing, which might be another pick that people object to. So the first question that I think I have is, name one pick, and we're just going to go one person at a time, that you think someone else made that was good value, and why? let's go ahead and start with John, since Van de Kamp's gone.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking here at the list, just briefly going over it, and
And don't say
if I'm gonna, no, I'm not. Yeah, number one pick overall. Definitely found some great value there. No, that'd be terrible. I'm actually really liking the Wild and Reckles pick for special. I believe he had to have taken support first, or possibly second, but that's just so much value right there. I mean, overall, I'm pretty sure as as our little Fantasy Rift circle did our draft values and whatnot, all of our rankings, we all put, especially as like the de facto number 2 support pick. I just see that as like a solid choice right there. Team Liquid should be going really hard this season, so I really like that one. If I had to really pick like a good value pick right at the 7th round, really nice.
Okay, until Van de Kamp rejoins, your picture is going to be just messed up because it's now a 2-person instead of a 3-person call. But I'd rather keep the content going, so I'm going to just switch over to screen of the draft. For me, I just want to weigh in on that a little bit. So actually, Xpecial was picked up in round 5, which I think is a huge value pick. Which just makes it even more of something that kind of just snuck onto his team. He still got to pick up a bunch of power picks. So I think Xpecial really is the defining pick. Let's go to you, Edward. One pick that someone else made that you think had a lot more value than expected.
I don't know if this is a more value pick or just a pick with a lot of upside. But I want to say the pick that you made, Matthias, with the Airwalks in the... I believe it was in the sixth round, right?
6th round, yeah.
Yeah, because in the past season, like there was a couple games where he just blew up. Like he just got insane amount of points. I feel like his upside is pretty big, and getting him that late into the draft, it's a little risky pick, but it could actually pay off and win you some games.
Yeah, that was my thinking. I hope it pays off. He was the top scorer of any fantasy pick last season that's still playing this season, so I think that gives him a lot of value. But the Copenhagen Wolves are kind of a weak team, so we're gonna have to stick around and like see how that pick pays off. Garrett, you're back just in time. We talked about Xpecial and Airwax. What do you think is the best value pick that someone picked up in the draft, and why?
Alright, so I am conditionally going to go ahead and say Nif. That's actually your pick, Matthias, and here's why I think it's good. Yellow Star last season was the best support by far.
4 points per
and
game.
it's when last summer split, and there are a lot of good reasons. All right, Fnatic is a good team, Yellow Star is a good player, but I think one of the most important reasons is that he was doing with Reckless, and now that or Reckles, whatever his name is. Now that Reckles is with Nif on Elements, I think picking up Nif and saying, you know what, I'm just going to take this top support, he's probably going to be better than everybody else out there, I think that's probably a good strategy. Now there's some other sketchy stuff going on with your picks, but I think Nif is going to be a great pick if it turns out to be the case that whoever Reckles lanes with just gets a crap ton of points.
So one thing that I do want to point out is actually every Alliance player, except for Wicked, went in round 1. The first 16 picks were all mids, AD carries, or Alliance team members. So there is something to that, and Wicked actually went pretty early too. He was the first top laner to go. Turning that on its head a little bit, and maybe taking some shots at each other, what do you think is the one pick that somebody else made that was bad value?
You know, I'd really just have to I'd really have to start off with Matt. I thought he was gonna like when I saw his first pick with Piglet, I was like, okay, Matt's definitely got something going on here. And then he picked up Shifter with his second, and I just started shaking my head the rest of the way. I just saw Shifter last season. I drafted him in several leagues, and I mean, just as someone who owned him, I kind of saw his decline just sharply, just so quickly. He just declined so fast. and it's really sad because he's hailed as such a great mid laner, and that just kind of like showed that you don't have to be like a great talent in the game, or something that you would think would lead to being successful in fantasy. That's really not. So yeah, I was pretty saddened by that, but hey, you know what? It's better for me.
Just to add a little bit to that, I remember him saying Shifter or Jesses, and I remember thinking, oh, I don't want either of those. And he ended up with both of them. Now, Jesses came later, and I think ended up being like a value money pick, and he did pick up Wicked, so his team is not a bad team by any means, but I feel like there were so many power picks left there for Shifter, like Pobelter, Power of Evil, Bjergsen, Forgiven, all the next picks that went, basically. And Shifter feels like, yeah, he could explode and have that upside he had on on Team Coast, where he kind of carried the team, but there's no reason to think that will happen.
I mean, let's just not to deviate too hard, but let's just really look at the picks that came directly after, just in that one round. We have Woolite, Mr. Ralez, Alltech, Doublelift. I would easily take all 4 of those players over Shifter.
Actually, you're going the other way. Those are the ones that came right before.
Am I?
But the ones that came right after were Pobelter, Power of Evil, Bjergsen, Forgiven, which are still these huge picks.
Either way,
yeah.
it's still, and then you have like Cop as the next like pick to go in the next round, and then Quas. So yeah, a little mind-boggling to me.
All right, Edward.
All right, for this, whoever is the Blue Witness, I think picking up Sneaky as a 3rd pick is a little bit too high. Personally,
me too. I
don't really see Cloud9 as like a team that's gonna have players that just go off and get you a lot of points. And with the 3rd pick, you really want a player that's gonna be bringing in those points. And I don't see Sneaky as that player.
Really?
I actually have to agree, but I'm gonna go ahead and let Garrett give his first. I've got some data to show that really backs up Edward's point.
Fair enough. So my theory is that in the first couple of rounds, you want to be picking up players who are safe bets, who are consistent, who will get you points, and who aren't risks. That being said, I think Alltech going in the second round to Matthias is very risky. I know I wrote an article saying, like, give some Alltech some love, but as pick number 10, that seems a little bit high for a volatile Winter Fox team who we haven't really seen play yet. But Sneaky at number 3, I mean, he is very consistent, very safe. People were going to pick him early anyway. I think that's a pretty good pick compared to Alltech.
Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm glad that you took a shot at me, because my pick for you is high. I really don't like Cloud9 in those early picks, and let me show you. I'm going to pull up this image. You're going to have to look at the stream to see this, but if you look at this chart, you can see that there's a clear trend between teams that win more games and teams that score more points. Obviously, that's no big surprise. People score more in wins than they do in losses, therefore, more wins means more points. However, what you can also see is that teams deviate quite significantly from that trend line. The obvious example is Millennium, who's like 1,000,000 points above that trend line. They're actually 4.81 times as far away from that line as any other team. And the next farthest team from that line is Cloud9. We can see over here. They are that distance away from that line, which means they score a significantly lower amount of points than you would expect, just given how many wins they have, which to me is worrying, because it says, hey, if I'm betting on Cloud9, they have to do at least 18-10 to just break. As you can see, like, Cloud9's about at the halfway point, right, with all the middle level fantasy teams. So going 18-10, they still pull like kind of even mid-level champion. So to say that they're going to be a top scoring player is to say that they're going to win what, like 20 games, 21 games, 22 games next season. To me, you can't make that. And another thing that will really sell that home is if you look at the rankings of players. This, in blue, obviously, is Cloud9. You can see that Balls is the top scorer, but he's still 8th place last split. So everyone on Cloud9 is below the 50% mark. And Sneaky actually is all the way down at I think that's 12th place. So he's not really a top tier AD carry, in my opinion. And that makes it hard for me to see him going as like a third pick when, say, Double Lift or Cop or Altec or Mr. Rallas or Wild Turtle or Woolite were all still up, and their teams all have more upside. Like, Woolite was on the Copenhagen Wolves and beat Sneaky. Now he's on a Rocket team that seems dominant, and so I can't imagine picking anyone on Cloud9 really that early on. So for me, High and Sneaky are kind of the two weird picks because of that.
And if I may kind of speak to the audience a bit, I know a lot of people on Reddit will talk about how poor or middle of the road SK Gaming was, but if you saw on that graph, they were just above them. So, if you think Cloud9 is that like super big powerhouse, you from last season, I think you got to look back to SK and they were just slightly better.
Exactly.
You kind of have to break away from this mindset that these phenomenal winning teams, like IEM was great, like Sneaky and Meteos were phenomenal, but like you kind of have to break away from this mindset that winning teams aren't always going to be great fantasy picks.
Exactly. You look at SK and they were the I think they were the number 4 team in Europe, and they picked up more points than Cloud9, who was just the top team in North America. And that means if SK gets better, SK's fantasy points are going to outstrip Cloud9. Now, if Cloud9 gets better, of course, their fantasy points will also go up, but Cloud9 is like already at that peak, and so it's hard for me to imagine them having like an even more breakout fantasy season. Whereas like Gambit, they might be way down here, and you think, oh, I don't want to draft Gambit, but Gambit only won 8 games last year. So if Gambit brings that up, like follow this trend line up, if they win 13 games, that puts them about in the middle, 14, and they're basically just under the trend line. So they would still, Gambit players to me are like less of a gamble than Cloud9 because they will go in the late rounds, whereas Cloud9 players, Balls went in round 4. Meteos went in round 4. High went in round... Balls was the 4th pick top laner. Meteos was the 4th pick jungler. High was the 2nd pick mid laner. Sneaky was the 3rd pick AD carry. Like, these are huge amounts of value that we put on these players in this draft, and I just don't see it being backed up by these numbers.
Yeah, I agree.
Was that numbers just based on the summer split, or were those inferential statistics that favor improbability? I'm coming in late on the conversation, I know.
Those are just numbers that reflect the summer split. Actually, they reflect the summer and the spring split, but the spring split numbers are not shown on the graph, even though they are part of the trend line. More data, but not wanting to have 2 icons on each part of the graph be confusing.
No, that's completely fair. I didn't catch all of what you said, so I can't necessarily reply to it. I still think Cloud9 is a pretty safe pick, kind of like how the Patriots are always going to be a safe pick. I'm outside of that.
Meteos and high-end Balls and Sneaky will always give you some value. They're never going to be, like, a pick like Hanser or Cali Trolls is a huge risk. They could be great or awful. Cloud9 will always be mid-tier, as you kind of saw from those numbers. But it's weird to me that all of the Cloud9 picks went so early when there were so many other available players.
Honestly, they went actually a lot earlier than I did. About 5 drafts yesterday, and that's like High going that early was pretty surprising. Sneaky going like top 5 is like standard for random leagues. But yeah, they went much faster than in any other leagues I was doing. In fact, I felt like there was at one point in time there was like a run on just like big name players overall. But that's just me.
I do think there is something to be said for the fact that when you look at these lower name players, people kind of stray away from them. I actually did so myself. I saw Corey in the draft, and I had like 3 options, and Corey was one of them, and I thought, who's Corey? I don't want him on my team. And then after the draft, I was like, oh, that's Selfie. I rated him as the number 3 mid.
Oh, wait, Corey is Selfie?
Corey is Selfie,
What?
yeah. Yeah, Selfie made it all the way to round 3.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, Selfie. You don't get to just change your name like that. You're playing with our hearts, alright?
Yeah, like you picked Vardags and you could have had Selfie.
Yeah, I know. I had to pick Vardags, Mr. Corey, so get the hell out of here.
So
I
think
don't know, man. Unicorns of Love. It's pretty. That's a lot of hype right there, man. They might blow up.
I just think that speaks a lot to the value of name and of team in picks, and I think it's hard to avoid that because I rated Balls and Meteos and Sneaky and High. You know, I've been trashing them. I mean, not as a team, but as a fantasy team for a long time. I obviously I didn't make that graph now. I had it prepared, and yet I think I rated in my power rankings High was like 4th or 5th, and Sneaky I even said Sneaky for me was a 3rd pick. So it's very easy to be suckered in by, like, you recognize a name, you know they're good, you're gonna go for them.
It's very true.
I guess that goes to my draft strategy, which was very early on. I wanted consistency. Cloud9 gives me that consistency, and that's why I picked High and why I don't see any problems with the Cloud9 strategies. If y'all are different, then well, that explains it.
Okay, so let's actually segue into that. Let's talk about what your draft strategy going is. We kind of gathered that your early draft strategy is consistency, but what was your overall draft strategy?
For me,
Let's start with Garrett, since he already gave us
Garrett.
a
Yeah,
spoiler.
let's get Garrett going.
Yeah, Segway's gonna want to give me a segue for the amount of segues that I do. Anyway, my first thing was to draft all of my carries first. My mid, my AD, and my flex, which was either going to be a mid or an AD. Give me them consistent points. After that, jungle, top, or support I was going to draft. Wasn't sure what order, didn't really care, and I was going to put team at the very bottom. And the reason why I picked the 7 that way is because I wrote an article on this earlier, and y'all probably already know this. When it comes to point values, there are 3 clear tiers. There's carries, there is non-carry players, and then at the bottom there's teams. And so I went ahead and picked that in that order. And when it came to my substitutes, I wanted a mid laner, a jungler, and a top laner because I ran the numbers a little bit earlier, and I haven't gotten to post all of the articles yet. But those 3 roles actually are dependent on their lane matchup a whole lot more than AD carries, supports, and teams are. And so I wanted those as my substitutes so that when I switched them out and made them good calls, they would give me more points than if I had been switching out an AD carry or a support.
Now, just to clarify, by lane matchup, you mean the player they're playing against, right?
Actually, I mean the team they're playing against, because
Okay.
I couldn't get the player they're playing against within
Awesome.
my data framework. But
I
yeah,
just wanted to make sure you didn't mean the champion, because that would be some prescient decisions. Like, oh, I think they're going to play LeBlanc this week. I'd better sit him.
you know, I'm pretty good at this, guys. I'm
That would-
almost omniscient at this point.
That would be impressive. So that does look like you drafted a mid, AD carry, jungle, support, top team. So it sounds like you followed your strategy. You have pretty stable picks throughout the draft. I think your one risky pick is actually Vardags, which is interesting.
Oh yeah. Vardags was weird for me. I wanted AD carry. I felt like because I wanted a mid in my sub roster,
Right.
and I was just looking around at the AD carries, and a lot of the good ones had just been picked up, and I was kind of stuck. And I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna roll the dice on Vardags. I want to see what he can give me.
Okay. Edward, obviously your strategy was influenced a bit by the fact you were first pick.
Cheater.
Once you were first pick, I think that gave you that situation where you're like, oh, I know I have Reckles, but I also know I don't get to pick forever. What were you thinking strategy-wise at that point?
Oh, yeah, after picking up Reckles, just the time for me to pick up my second player, it took forever. Like, I was just watching all these players go by off the board. And then I'm like, who's going to be left? Because after that, like, I already have that player that's going to give me a lot of points every week. And after that, I just need players who aren't that risky, and they're going to give you a consistent amount of points. So I'm looking for players that are going to be just slightly above average. And obviously, the positions that I saw that got the most points were AD carry and mid. So after picking up an ADC, I was going to go for that mid player, and either the best mid or ADC that was still available on the board as my flex pick. Obviously, you guys could debate if Forgiven is a good pickup for me. I think he's going to do pretty good. I have faith in him. So that's why I picked him up. It's my third pick. And after that, just start filling up the spots with the best available players in each position. I think one pick that you guys might debate a little bit is Freddie. I thought he did pretty good at Worlds, and I think he has a lot of potential. And with SK, with the different lineup now they're doing, I think that Freddie has a lot of potential to actually be one of a surprise pick, pretty much.
I think, yeah, Freddie is very strong. He showed at Worlds that, I mean, in a meta where people were banning out Maokai and Alistar, they banned Aatrox and Nidalee against him every game. Like, who even plays Aatrox and Nidalee? Just Freddie. Like, Korean, well, no, I guess Royal Club even was like, we don't want to, no, just take it off the table. The one thing that seemed a little bit problematic to me about your team is the fact that it's got 3 TSM players. And I feel like that was maybe more of an accident of, like, what was available. But with such a strong pick in Reckles, like you said, it seems to me like you want a safe, consistent team. And having 3 players on the same team kind of means it's like boom or bust in, like, either they all do well or they all do poorly. And I don't know if that works well with Reckles or if that works poorly. Like, I haven't figured it out yet, because obviously Reckles is such consistent, so many points, that maybe that just means that any given week, if TSM explodes, no one can stop you. But if TSM fails, at least you still have Reckles.
Yeah, I was hoping to pick up Team Liquid instead of TSM, but yeah, they got taken the pick before me. Yeah, so that completely just messed up my train of thought of what I wanted to draft. So I just had to say I have to pick up TSM now, or I risk getting a worse team later down the line.
Yeah. John, you were second, and you ended up picking up Froggen, who is a lot of people agree the obvious pick. Did you have a similar sort of feeling as Edward, where like, oh man, all these players are going to be gone?
You know, I really did. It's kind of frightening sometimes, but you're also left with that Froggen pick, which is really like nice. You're like, well, all these guys are going, but I know for a fact that Froggen's gonna like outdo all these players I'm looking at that are going. So I just really had to like stick to my own draft strategy, which unfortunately I kind of didn't. Like Garrett, I like to pick all my carries first. Then I try to find the most value within top and jungle, then support and team, fill my bench after that. And what ended up happening is I picked up Jankos before I picked up my AD carry. And for me, what the problem was is, if you guys are looking at the same spreadsheet I can just see all these AD carries. Like, literally, I'm looking at 8 AD carries I would have taken over Jankos, but they all got picked up before I could take them. So I was kind of like stuck somewhere. I think the next few that went, if I'm reading this off right, because it doubles back, right? It's like Cop and Wild Turtle. So I think after that, there's like really not much. So for me, I was like, all right, I'm going to try and pick up. I was actually trying to get Vardags in a later round, but Garrett picked him up a little bit sooner than I could. I'm a pretty big fan of Unicorns of Love in the preseason, so that was kind of disheartening to me. So I figured after that, I was like, all right, I can't go AD carry. Like, there's so little value that if I pick one, it's just going to be a wasted pick. So I basically just dropped the idea of picking up an AD carry until like near the end of the draft. So I was kind of not happy about that. But, looking at my roster, it's pretty solid. Mimer, Vander, Team Liquid, Vizichachi, Steelback, Horo, Impulse as my bench lineup. It's pretty saddening, but, when I look at that Steelback pick, it makes me, I just can't even, I'm honestly turning my head away from my computer right now.
There is one thing that I feel hurts me a little bit, is your 7th pick, which is kind of like your last starting pick. You were actually the only person not to have You and Matt, actually, were the only people not to have a complete roster by the end of 7 picks. Matt was missing his team pick, which isn't really that important. You were missing your AD carry. And you picked up Vizicachi there, who I think a lot of people think will be a strong top laner. But you already had Mimer, who's this hugely dominant top laner. He was like one of the top scoring top laners last season. And in between Vizicachi and Steelback, I think Mash went. And I feel like Mash is an AD carry with, like, some potential. Maybe not, actually. It's hard to say. I think Steelback will be a more consistent pick just because we know he's laning with Yellowstar. So I understand that. I just mean, it was weird to me that you picked up your top laner then, as opposed to waiting.
I kind of thought that no one was really looking at Mash. Yeah, just at 80 carries. I really didn't think anyone was going to be... But, I mean, as you can see, a few did get taken up.
I only had 180 carry, so that was that had to be my next pick.
Unfortunately, what's difficult about the the fantasy app or the application that they use for the drafting process,
it's hard to look at other people's teams.
It's hard to look at other people's teams, so I really didn't I kind of had this idea in my head that, okay, a couple people haven't picked yet, but I still saw, Overpow, look at that value you got right there. That's pretty solid, at least if I went back to my own rankings. That's some pretty good value right there that you picked up super late. So, I was hoping, I was like, all right, one more round. I saw the Vizicachi, and I was like, that's a Unicorns of Love player. I gotta get him. And then I'm stuck with Steelback. So I guess that's really, my fault.
So I guess I should talk about my general strategy now, since it was entirely different from everyone else's. Of the first 2 picks, again, like I mentioned, 16 picks, 14 mids and 80 carries. That's 7 of each, and 1 jungle and 1 support. And I led with support with Nif, and then I picked up Altec. And my plan had kind of been to pick up more carry roles, but I ended up getting Quas. And the reason for that is just the drop-off. Quas was already a strong top laner, and he's going to get bumped up, I think, by Team Liquid being stronger. But the weakness that you can see that comes out of my team as a result is, my flex pick. I'm running Sorin right now. Now, Sorin wasn't drafted. I waiver wired Sorin. That's how bad my flex pick is. He just happens to have good matchups this week. He plays against Giants and H2K, so I thought he would be a good player to start. But my strategy was basically... I had the similar experience of Edward and John of watching all the top picks go away. Reckles went, Froggen went, Sneaky went. Well, I guess I don't see Sneaky as a top pick, but Piglet went. And I was just thinking man, where are these hyper carry roles? Double Lift is, I guess, still up, but I don't know how CLG is going to do this year. Xiao was already gone because of that weirdness. Woolite and Rollas are left, but I'm gambling on teams that have had roster changes. So for me, it was all, while yes, I was kind of thinking Nif was an option, it was more the fact that just when I looked at it, I was thinking there's no pick that excites me here in the carry realm. And I'd rather just wait.
I don't necessarily hate your Nif pick. I'm just wondering if you waited...
Can you say that sentence again?
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate your Nif... Alright, anyway. Gosh, guys. Why didn't you save him for the second round? Do you think Lynx would have picked him up?
I had talked with Lynx about my intent to pick up Nif on the swing, and I knew that he did not think it was a good strategy. But I didn't want to risk him, drafting me. And while, Xiao actually went before me. You guys traded Xiao and Hai. So Hai, like I've said, is a player that I don't value highly. Double Lift,
I would have traded with you, bro.
Like I said, is also a player that I really don't... Just because CLG is going to be in such turmoil this year with the roster swap, Zion's entirely... So I guess I could have gone Altec Nif, but what I was thinking was, if I pick Nif, and he picks 280 carries, I still get an 80 carry I want. Double Lift, Altec, Rowlez, Woolite, forgiven, all left. If I pick Altec and he takes Nif, Yeah, specials left, but he's not someone I feel comfortable investing a power pick in. And so now all of a sudden I'm missing out on getting any power picks. I feel like you kind of have to control the terms of the draft and make sure you get those power picks. So I knew I wasn't going to get them in AD carry and mid because they were gone. And that's actually where I feel like second pick is at a huge disadvantage right now because the power pick is a mid laner, and as we saw, AD carries just went by like crazy. In the first 3 rounds, 11 AD carries drafted compared with 8 mid laners, 2 tops, 2 junglers, and 1 support. Like, and you miss out not only on having an AD carry early on because you're getting Froggen, then you have to wait 15 picks to do anything again.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
So I just wanted to make sure I secured my power picks there before I did anything elsewhere. I guess moving on from the top picks, what do people think, and you might have to look at the benches to see this, but what do people think the best benches are? I sort of just thought about that looking. If you look at the draft order spreadsheet that I sent you, you can see those benches. They're just the last 3 picks.
Yep.
But I mean, I'm just going to answer since I'll give you time to look at that. My answer has to be Edward, actually, which is funny because at first pick you'd think he'd be like picking up a strong starter and then having a weak roster from then on. But Overpow, Diamond Prox, I can't call him Diamond, sorry, and Keen are just like, those are starters on the right team, right? Like, there are people with a worse top laner than Overpow. I'm convinced. There are certainly people with worse junglers than Diamond. I might be one of those people, actually, if Copenhagen Wolves goes poorly. And then Keen was kind of a bright spot for Team Gravity during... Uh-oh. I might have just said something stupid. He's on Gravity, right? Yeah. During the expansion tournament, he was just, like, extremely dominant. So I feel like those 3 are all really solid picks. Then I look at my bench, and I have Kikis, Cali Trolls, and Mash, and like I feel like, man, I must have done something horribly in those last 3 rounds because there were so many picks available. And I think part of it was my subs had, because of my strategy, had to be AD carries and mids, but all the good AD carries and mids are gone by then. Whereas, like, there's always going to be decent top laners and junglers left. Anyone have any different thoughts, I guess, on the benches?
On the benches, if I had to pick out, like, really some solid draft picks that came out of the bench spots, yours were really, like, up there. I really like those.
Mine?
The Blue Witness really, like, came out with Imagine really late, and I totally forgot about him. I completely... I think I had asked too when we were drafting. I was like, "Has anyone taken Imagine?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, he's gone already." I was like, "God, that means I asked that question within those 3 rounds," and I was like, just barely missed him. And then you taking up Mash, that was pretty solid. I really like Mash coming out of the preseason. Yellow Star from John. That was pretty interesting. I was like, last pick, if I had to give a flyer out to someone, Yellows on last year's #1 support.
I'd actually take Yellow Star over Lemon.
Yeah, that's pretty that's pretty crazy. And then Lynx with Nisbeth. That's also a solid last pick right there. That's pretty good.
Yeah, what I really liked was John Sabbath's, which is Word Dispenser's last pick. He got Yellow Star, but he also got Impaler and then Pinoy? Is that how you say that? I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
I like those 3 picks. I really do. I also like how Matt picked up Zion Spartan way at the end, even though we all know he's going to be benched this first week. Like, I like that. I'm also a little bit surprised that Gambit players didn't go as quickly as they should have, and that most of them were picked within the what is this? The bench. Yeah, our bench players are sub players. So anybody who got a Gambit player, I'm really happy for them. But I'm just surprised that they didn't go very quickly within the regular draft.
Everyone seems to love Gambit players, just not enough to like. I think a lot of people thought, like, oh, I'll pick up those Gambit players, and if Gambit is good, like, I think they're going to be sweet. The one thing that's weird to me is how many people picked up solid subs for their solid stars. So, for example, I did not invest in a top lane sub. I've got Quas. I don't think I have a support... Like, there would be no reason for me to have a support sub. Whereas I feel like there were a couple of people where I thought, like, man, they have a top tier... I'm going to pick on Johnny here for a moment. No, I'm not, actually. Yeah, Mimer. You have Mimer, who's, like, this godlike top laner. And then Vivichachi is... I mean, Vivichachi is the pick that I kind of, like, feel weird about.
Yeah.
Well...
Whereas, like...
I've also got, like, some kind of, like, weird, like... You know, with my AD carry being Steelback, that means I'm kind of like scratching my head for my flex pick.
Yeah, it like has to be a mid, and if Power of Evil doesn't pay off, there aren't very many mids left. Whereas like if you have two mids and two AD carries, you have a free backup flex. Like I've got Mash if someone fails.
Yeah.
But I guess what was like a example of why I think Diamond is such a good sub is that. Edward's team has Santorin, who's this jungler that we're not sure about. He's playing on a very pedigreed team, TSM, but all we've seen him do is fail at IEM San Jose against Unicorns of Love. So, like, Diamond to me is this... It's like, one of those teams is going to do well, right? Hopefully. And so, for me, that's a great sub pick. Or, like, another really good sub pick is, if you're looking at John Sabbath's team, Word Dispenser, his AD carry is Woolite. And then his flex and mid are Selfie and Phoenix. So, like, Phoenix and Woolite are both these players where we're like, I don't know how they're going to do this season, but he's got Panoy on the bench. So it's this situation where it's like, not all these players are going to do well, but one of them will. Whereas, say, Matt's Zion Spartan under Wicked feels weird to me. Wicked will do well.
Yeah.
I guess I could be wrong about that, but I feel like Wicked...
I mean, I don't think you're going to be moving Wicked out of there. Maybe he thought Zion was a good enough player just to, like, keep off of our teams.
No, that's
sure.
totally a reasonable consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really gotta question people who didn't pick up 2 mids and 2 AD carries. Sorry about this, Jack, my boy, but yeah, they just earned so much more points that I can't imagine. If your first flex goes bad, I can't imagine who you would put in at this point, because even a bad mid or a bad AD carry earns more points than a jungler. They just do.
Yeah, I'm even honestly, I'm looking at available players on our waiver wire right now, and I'm kind of tempted to have Vardags, but then I have 3 Unicorns of Love players, and that's like, yeah, I don't want to be stuck in that situation. We got Hjarnan, Adri, Apollo, and Maple Street, and that's just like, you're picking hairs right there. I mean, H2K got hosed by losing Thebevin.
Really?
Who was like...
you dropped Vardags?
I dropped Vardags?
Yeah, I did.
You dropped Vardags for freeze?
Yeah.
No, not for freeze.
Oh, okay.
No, I got a much better pickup out for that.
Oh, you made a trade with someone.
No. I picked up whatchamacall? Freeze, yeah. I got freeze.
You are so troll right now.
I actually just dropped Vizichachi for Vardags because I just can't have.
I'm glad you did that, because I was gonna hate pick up Vardags otherwise.
I just can't. I can't have that. I just can't have the problem I have without not having a second AD carry. It just hurts my like inners too much.
I do have to disagree that you need 2 AD carries and 2 mids. There is one team that does not need one, and that is Lynx's team. He's got Xiao, Double Lift, and Cop. Now, those carries might not be top tier necessarily. There are situations where we could be like, oh, well, Double Lift has a bad season. But what sub are you going to pick up in that situation? Like, those are all such bread and butter carries that I feel like you're safe not having another one. And if he invested more in another mid or AD carry, that just hurts his jungle top support picks.
Yeah, he could have double backed around, like say, without coming off of his without because Lynx had the two picks back to back, right? If I'm looking at this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could have come back instead of. Look at this. He picked Cop. The next pick directly after that was by you, Matthias, and you got Quas. So, like, if I had to go Cop over Quas, I don't know, man. That's pretty gutsy. I'd rather take Quas on that one. So.
Okay. Any last thoughts on going into week 1? Maybe make one surprising prediction for week 1. You've got 1 minute. Go, John.
If I had to make a surprising prediction for week 1, I would watch out for teams that are going up against Dignitas. They were notorious last season for not allowing their opposing lane partners to score anything. I believe they led the league in that category just about the whole way through. So watch out for Dignitas matchups. They're just super low scoring games.
Well, good to see that I don't have any Dignitas. Actually, I only have 2 North American players, so that's maybe not a fair comparison. Or 1 at this point. Or 2, yeah. Okay, Edward?
Alright, so for week 1, I really want to take a close look at Team Impulse's games, because we'll get a little preview of if that roster is going to mesh together, like they're going to work well. And I really want to watch out for Rush, because he's either going to be a really good player or he's just going to be an average, mediocre player.
Yeah,
Like, obviously he's highly ranked in the Korean server, but he doesn't really have too much experience playing competitively. So week 1's going to be a true test of his skill, see how he's able to play in the jungle in a competitive aspect, and see that whole team could work together.
Alright, Garrett?
Yeah, so Wild Turtle is going to score 2 points this entire week because Wild Turtle is a rat bastard who cost me my league last season. So that's my prediction. Wild Turtle can go screw themselves. Now, TSM needs to do well because Dyrus is on my team. But yeah, Wild Turtle, 4 points all
4
week.
points for Wild Turtle?
4 points.
I think
That
And
that's
because Blue Witness is probably going to lose.
most
But
likely prediction to be
that's-
true. 4 points. Okay.
most likely.
Okay, here's my prediction for week 1. Ward Dispenser is he's basically 3 points above being the last ranked team in our league. I think his team is actually one of the strongest. Lemonation is a slight weak point, but I think we're going to see Impact come out strong. Maybe that's not a surprising prediction, and maybe that's a little bit too tied to your Team Impulse question, but they feel like LMQ last split, where everyone's like, I don't know how they're going to do, and then Xiao Wai Xiao, as we know, lit up Fantasy. So I can't imagine him not being a huge player. But I guess since I kind of stole yours, I'll say SK will be awesome. Yay. Less exciting of a prediction, but yay.
Yay.
Does anyone else have anything that I've maybe missed? Comments that they think will be important for week 1? Draft advice for people listening?
Well, who am I facing? I gotta see that because I gotta
Facing
have some
Cloud9.
mad
I mean,
smack
Blue
talk.
Witness.
Am I? Oh, okay. Okay, so this guy right here picks Wild Turtle, and automatically that means he's gonna lose to me in week 1. So sorry that you're a scrub, bro, but
The
you can
salt is real.
Get out.
Wow.
just go home. What
Okay,
is this? What? Who is he again? I forget.
30 seconds.
This is
Week 1 prediction. Who wins your matchup and why? Let's start with Edward since he's so salty. Or sorry, Garrett. Let's start with Garrett since he's so salty.
Wait, why my team's gonna win?
Why is your team gonna win?
Oh yeah, so I got some pretty good, consistent players
This
at
week.
my
Why is your team gonna win this week?
This week? Yeah. Carry rolls, Freeze is pretty good. Especially with Copenhagen Wolves playing absolute crap teams. And then Wild Turtle's gonna score 4 points, so that means I'm gonna win. Yeah.
Okay. Edward, why is your team gonna win this week?
I could sum it up in one word. Reckless. That's it. That's all you need.
You bastard.
You know,
Get out.
I can't argue against that.
It's
so
a
hard.
good-
51 projected points is 9 higher than the next highest person. That's like an 18% value increase, maybe more actually. It's so much. It's too many points.
Veto.
When a player is predicted to get 51 points, like, you gotta feel really confident going in that
Right?
week.
Like you're looking at projections and you're like, well, I mean, these matchups are all pretty tough, but I've got Reckles, so looks good to me. Okay, John, I'll let you go first since you're matched up against me this week.
God, I'm actually like, this is a good matchup. I'm pretty stoked about it because I'm looking at these EU matchups specifically with Roccat, and I know that you've got a Nuke Duck, but Yankos and Vander are gonna get so many assists. Nuke Duck can get all the kills he wants, but I'm gonna rack up all these assists, and SK and Gambit are just their knees are gonna buckle. You might see some classic, like, super long games out of one of these two. So if I'm gonna win, it's because of that. And Froggen's just gonna put up like a nice, like, 50-cent piece worth of fantasy points
Froggen will
there.
be a beast. So what you're saying is you're gonna ride the coattails of Nuke Duck on my team to victory on your team. So-
Easily.
My counter argument is that Nuke Duck is a solo player. He's not even gonna wait for Yonkos. It's gonna be like level 1. He's gonna go all in and get a kill, and Yonkos is gonna be like, "Bro, I was on my way," and then Nuke Duck's gonna snowball the game. But actually, I think I will win week 1 because of Soren. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna be playing the waiver wire on mid and AD carry every week. Everyone in our league has 2 AD carries or 2 mids, which means if anyone wants to pick up any other AD carries or mids, they have to drop one for me to take. So I can always have backup pools and just pick whoever has good matchups. So I actually gained 4 projected points this week from Soren. I dropped Fox. I don't know why I drafted Fox. Don't ask me.
Well, hey,
I
you know, the
can't deny
Copenhagen
that.
Wolves.
That's why I picked up Freeze.
The Wolves could not be worse than Giants Gaming. There's no way. I don't believe it. It's just not possible. The H2K game, that'll be interesting. That'll be really interesting, though.
Okay, well,
I believe.
Oh, go ahead and say what you wanted to say. I'm gonna wrap up.
Oh, I believe. I believe in Copenhagen Wolves. I believe in a
Wolves.
thing called love. I believe that we will win. Yeah.
All right, well, this is Fantasy Rift. We'll be back on Wednesday evening, probably around 5 p.m. Pacific time, to review week 1 and talk about any sort of waiver wire picks that are likely to be up. Thanks for watching.